solemn assurances given by the American military when the residents of Ashraf surrendered their weapons in 2003, our Secretary of State, when she was questioned about it then, said that the attack was an internal matter for the government of Iraq and not a concern of the United States. Well, we're on the eve of negotiations with the Iranian regime by our government and others. The history of the relationship between the United States and the Iranian regime since the 1979 revolution can really be summed up as a series of attempts by the United States to, as the diplomats say, engage the Iranian regime, each attempt slightly less successful than the one that preceded it. I don't have to review that entire history, but an important part of it begins in the 1990s during the Clinton administration, when the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran, also known as MEK, was designated by the Secretary of State under U.S. law as a foreign terrorist organization. That designation continues to this day. It continues to be, as it was then, unjustified. MEK is an organization of Iranians, both inside Iran and outside Iran, that opposes the current regime, favors government in Iran that is organized along democratic, secular, non-nuclear lines, a democratic, secular, non-nuclear republic. And I should add, this is not one of the few organizations of Iranians that fits that description. It is, in point of fact, the only one. It is certainly helpful for MEK to remain a bone in the throat of Iran and a diversion to the regime because of its potential to undermine the regime. But the MEK has been a lot more than just a bone in the throat. It has provided valuable information and intelligence on the Iranian nuclear program to the United States. It is fair to say that the United States would not have known a great deal of what it does know now about the Iranian nuclear program without information obtained by MEK, including, but certainly not limited, to the nuclear facilities at Natanz and Arak, the disclosure of which led to the beginning of pressure on Iran that arises from what is obviously a nuclear weapons program. It's pretty openly acknowledged that the reason MEK was placed on the list during the Clinton administration was to curry favor with Iran and to use the designation as a way of entering into dialogue with the Iranian regime. And I'm sorry to say that even during the administration that I served in, we kept it on the list of designated organizations, which, by the way, includes the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, out of fear that if MEK were removed from the list, the Iranians would provide insurgents with weapons in Iraq, including IEDs. Well, of course, they're doing that anyway. These are very misguided reasons for continuing to brand as terrorists a group of people who, so far as anyone can tell, are interested only in bringing to their country the same benefits of freedom that we have. And also, it doesn't work. The Iranian regime is now in the enviable position of having the United States designate as a terrorist organization a group of Iranians who are a threat to that regime, and of limiting that group's activities. In other words, the Iranians have the great Satan working for them. And of course, the continued designation of the MEK as a foreign terrorist organization gives great comfort to the Iranian regime by putting on the sidelines an organization that is potentially a grave threat to the regime, and it also provides an added justification for the regime to execute MEK members in Iran and to boast that in doing so it is executing terrorists. A 63-year-old man named Ali Saremi, whose only crime was to visit his son at Ashraf, was executed at the end of 2010 as one guilty of enmity against God or terrorism. What's to be done? As you're aware, there's a growing consensus here in this country and outside it of the need to delist MEK. An ever-increasing number of members of Congress are supporting a resolution favoring that result, and there is great consensus outside the Congress as well. I think the case has been made that when Iranians go into the street and put their lives on the line for freedom, as they are doing now and as they did after the fraudulent election in 2009, our response, through those in our government who speak for us, must be more than to remind the mullahs, as we did, that the world is watching. The world is watching? The world has watched frequently while horrors were committed and done nothing. The world was watching when the Germans committed genocide and murdered 6 million of my co-religionists during World War II. The world was watching when revolutions were suppressed by the Soviets in Eastern Europe. The world was watching genocide in Rwanda and Darfur. The world is watching isn't enough. We owe the Iranian people and the freedom that we stand for much more. What is necessary is to make clear in word and deed that we can offer more than condolences when things go wrong to people who are willing to put their lives on the line for freedom. We must offer support and encouragement, and we must make it clear in word and deed to the Iranian regime that we stand with those who stand for freedom and demand regime change. An effective way to do that would be to enter the upcoming negotiation with Iran having taken MEK off the list of foreign terrorist organizations, which would show that we recognize MEK as a group that is devoted to restoring freedom to Iran, and that we will not use MEK and not let anybody else use MEK as a bargaining chip. I thank you very much for the privilege of speaking with you.
Thank you, Bob, for that kind introduction. Thank you very much for your very warm reception. I very much appreciate it. I hope it is not lost on all in attendance the significant bipartisan nature of the participants in today's forum. We are looking for things in this town, for policy objectives and outcomes that we would like to be shared by both sides of the aisle, and I guess it's very important and a very visible statement that these Republicans and these Democrats haven't worked for Republican and Democrat administrations feel unanimously that the designation of MEK should be lifted and should be lifted now. So I think it's a pretty good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said this before. Some of my friends have heard it, but I'll keep saying it until the designation is lifted. Time is not our ally in our collective efforts to prevent the tyrannical regime in Tehran from becoming a nuclear power. As a matter of fact, time is running out. We need to understand that. I'd like to read you something that was written and spoken in September of 1995. Listen carefully. I wish to address a pivotal issue: how to confront this regime and the fundamentalism and terrorism it fosters. The issue is key because on the international level, all approaches and policies vis-a-vis the mullah's religious terrorist dictatorship have proven futile. Indeed, in many cases, they have taken advantage of by the regime, which has been the only party to benefit from them. September 1995, Maryam Rajavi, President-elect, National Council of Resistance of Iran. 1995, push forward to January of 2011. What has changed? Has there been a regime change? Is there less oppression, more freedom, more peaceful engagement with the rest of the world? 16 years later, nothing has changed, and I think time is running out. It was interesting when the parties met in December, and they agreed to meet in December knowing full well that when the representatives from the Iranian government appeared, they were not inclined to discuss their nuclear intentions. One does wonder why everybody bothered showing up, because the only thing they agreed to do at that time was they agreed to convene again. In anticipation of the next meeting, which is in the next couple of weeks, the UN ambassador has basically said that in regard to the UN and EU sanctions that have been directed against Iran for its noncompliance with UN resolutions over its nuclear program, the ambassador said, quote, "The issue of sticks and carrots proved to be unsuccessful.